President Roosevelt's administration during its third and fourth term was focused on the safety of the United States and the growing conflict in Europe. This mostly resembles his major contributions to government.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. So I call this meeting today to discuss our position on this ongoing war in Europe. I would like to hear everyone's stance on this matter. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we should go to war, show our strengths on the battlefield.
I agree.
Mr. Secretary?
I don't think it is our place to intervene in Europe's problems. This war should be handled by themselves.
Mr. Secretary?
It'll be tough to finance a war after the depression we just suffered.
My problem here is that if we do not get involved and Europe is not able to sort this matter out, that we will see war on our shores soon.
We should at least give aid to allied countries in support of their war efforts.
The public would definitely like to see the country get involved. They obviously do not like what is happening.
At least giving aid would definitely shore up our alliances in Europe and will allow us to gain support across the world.
Giving aid, both military and economically, would certainly act as a catalyst for our economy. Production and trade would have to increase.
That's it then. We will supply the allies, but keep our neutrality as best we can.
The United States held their neutrality for the most of the beginning of World War II. However, things changed on December 7, 1941. On that day, the Japanese launched a surprise attack on many locations. One was at the port at Pearl Harbor, a major naval base for the United States. This day changed the course of history. On December 8, 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt stepped to the podium in front of Congress and gave this speech.
Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at solicitation of Japan, still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. And while this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue the existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or of armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii from Japan makes it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu.
The United States declared war that day after FDR finished this speech. They joined the war on the side of the Allies, fighting alongside the Great Britain and Russia against Germany, Italy, and Japan. The Allies won the war in September of 1945.
So you better stay up, play up.
President Roosevelt had a huge impact on the second strand of history, economics. FDR wasted no time when he was voted into the office and immediately started to pull the country out of the Depression. His New Deal program created jobs for the unemployed and created programs like the Industrial Recovery Act to keep businesses honest and intact.
Hello, Mr. President.
Hello, have a seat. Let's talk about the New Deal.
So what will this new deal include?
Here are a few of my ideas. The Emergency Banking Act will recognize the banks and close the ones that were insolvent. I will ask Congress to end prohibition and legalize alcohol again, and I will propose a National Industrial Recovery Act, which will guarantee that workers have the right to unionize and bargain collectively for higher wages and better working conditions. Lastly, I will create a federally funded Public Works Administration.
What will the goal of the administration be?
The main objective of the Public Works Administration will be to create jobs that will get people back to work. We must decrease the unemployment rate. 25% is unacceptable.
Go.
Daddy's home.
Hey kids,
Oh, hey, Dad.
how's it going? Not a good day today, guys.
What happened?
Well, you see, the stock market crashed, and I got fired from my job.
What are we gonna do?
Not sure. I'm gonna run to the bank and get as much money as we can. I'll be back, guys.
Sounds good.
How did it go?
Bad news. So I ran to the bank, and they said we could only get half of what we saved. So not a lot of money.
We're running out of money. You have to get a job soon.
I know. Kids, I'm sorry.
We're hungry.
No thanks.
Fam. Great news. I got a job at the TBA with the great help of FDR.
That's awesome! Yeah! Let's go!
I'm so sick of that same old love. Feels like I've blown a cord. I'm so sick.
President Roosevelt, in relation with science and technology, brought forward the TVA to Congress for legislation necessary to enlist this project in the service of the people. Don't look at me.
Okay. Come on.
Mr. Truman, please sit down. Good evening, Mr. Truman. How are you doing today?
I'm well, Mr. President. Thank you. How's Father doing today?
Follows well. But Mr. Truman, I have an important suggestion to give to Congress.
I'm here to listen. What suggestions do you have?
I had written these thoughts in my diary, and I would love to share them with you. I've been thinking a lot lately about a great national investment in the Tennessee Valley. This investment would essentially lead me to ask Congress for legislation necessary to enlist this project in service of the people.
Sir, what is this project you're talking about? Please tell me more.
If envisioned entirely, this project would transcend power and development. This idea of the project enters a wide field of flood control, soil erosion, reforestation, elimination of agriculture use of marginal lands, and distribution of diversification of industry.
Yes. Please continue.
In short, this power development of war days leads logically to national planning for the complete river watershed. This would involve many states and the future lives of welfare millions. It would touch and give life to all forms of human concerns.
Mr. President, this is great, but where will we get the water runoff for this project?
We would use the conservation and development of natural resources. The Tennessee Valley Drainage Basin and its adjoining territory would be perfect for this project. It would be perfect because of the general social and economic welfare of the nation.
Even if we were to use the river for runoff, how exactly would this project work?
You see, if we build main river dams, these dams would level off seasonal floods of the river. This would reduce destructive flooding and maintaining a channel suitable for navigational flood control. This flood control would be available locations from Knoxville, Tennessee to Paducah, Kentucky.
I understand. Yeah, please continue.
Valuable byproduct in form of a hydroelectric power would be released from storage drains. This project would generate electricity and would essentially modernize the regions along the river. It would provide navigational flood control, electricity generation, fertilizer manufacture, and economic development in the Tennessee Valley.
This does sound like a good idea.
I therefore suggest Congress legislation to create a Tennessee Valley Authority, a corporation clothed with power of government, but possessed of the flexibility and initiative of the private enterprise. Come in.
Mr. President, someone's here to see you. Should I let them in?
Yes, thank you. Please excuse me, Mr. Truman. We will talk more about this. Looking forward to carrying this conversation with you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Feel that.
Beautiful.
President Roosevelt embodied the strand of movers and shakers in that he was the first handicapped president to be elected into office. The entire time, he maintained a strong persona despite being wheelchair-bound for life.
The vast majority of the American people are under no impression that I am handicapped, and I see no reason to publicize this in any way.
President Roosevelt, with all due respect, I'm speaking to you as a friend and not a vice president. Are you prepared to hide such a conformity to the public?
Eleanor calls my illness a blessing in disguise, and I plan to keep it just that, a disguise.
Well then, you have my full support. But would you mind if I inquired on your condition?
You must understand that there is no record of me discussing this with anyone, and I plan to keep it this way.
That's understood, sir.
Well then, I had my first symptoms in August of 1921 when I was 39 years of age. I was vacationing in New Brunswick with my family when I became very ill and in severe pain. After a misdiagnosis of a spinal cord blood clot and then a spinal cord lesion, Dr. Robert Lovett eventually came to the conclusion that I had contracted polio, which would eventually paralyze me from the waist down. I began to use leg braces and told myself that one day I would complete the quarter-mile walk to the end of my driveway, and trained myself motivated by the mailbox at the end of the drive.
That's fascinating.
While I was still optimistic that I may eventually have a full recovery, I traveled to Warm Springs, Georgia to a rehab facility. In 1926, I bought the entire facility and built it up to be a foundation specifically for treating polio-stricken victims.
But when did you find your way back to politics?
In my own stubborn confidence and Eleanor's support, I ran for the governor of New York, and as you know, I held office for 2 years before running for the presidency.
So, now that you've been elected president, how do you plan to conceal this disability?
I've always had a good relationship with the media, and as it remains so, there will be an understanding between us to only publicize moments of my physical positivity to the American people.
You did do seemingly well during the campaign, traveling by train so you could not hold on to the railing, and you seemed as though you were always at ease.
Precisely, and I can continue to deliver many of my speeches seated. I plan to reach the majority of Americans through the radio as well, which will clearly give no implication I have any sort of condition.
What do you plan to do now during White House events, when you are in contact with direct people?
I'm able to stand with the support of a companion and my leg braces. Therefore, I can easily stand to greet guests, and while they are escorted to the dining room, an assistant will bring forward my wheelchair. I can use the elevator and be wheeled to my spot at the head of the table and appear as if I am already seated for the meal.
Brilliant. They will be none the wiser. Sir, you do understand that you are the only individual in recorded history to date that has been elected by his people despite being able to walk or stand without assistance.
Yes, Mr. Garner, and while this may someday be seen as a great achievement, I intend to achieve far greater things throughout this presidency.
Of course, Mr. President. That's understood.
Mr. President, it's time to go.
Now watch me whip. Kill it. Now watch me nay nay. Okay. Now watch me whip, whip. Watch me nay nay.
A constant voice of hope and reason, President FDR used fireside chats and the media to help people after the trials of the Great Depression. Through the chats, FDR found a way to appeal to the people and make them reassured that the economy will be okay after the trials of the Great Depression.
Hello, Mr. President.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad. I have a proposition. I'm going to start an idea called the fireside chats. These will be to inform people as to what is going on with the nation's economy, and eventually this will help us dig our way out of the Great Depression. What do you think?
Sounds good. When will the first fireside chat be?
The first of the chats will be held on March 12th over public radio. This will be to ensure people that their banks are safe, because in such a dark hour, it's hard to be optimistic. But I am speaking to you from one friend to another.
What are the positives that you see out of these fireside chats?
Well, we live in a world where we are constantly communicating. So if I can get the public to see that I'm reaching out to them in ways that are more convenient and suitable by going on the radio, they are sure to see that they can open up to me and they can trust my policies. Radio is just becoming very, very popular, and that may help me use the strand of media that I like so very much in my appeal to the general public that is going to be useful for America. Many supporters will find this effective, and I think it's important as well. They will be very successful in the eyes of the people, I believe.
Pretty fit though.
How about them Red Sox?
Tough loss against the Yankees.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. FDR is talking on the radio. I think he's calling a fireside chat. Listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
My friends, I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking. To talk with the comparatively few who understand the mechanics of banking, but more particularly with the overwhelming majority of you who use banks for the making of deposits and the drawing of checks. I want to tell you what has been done in the last few days and why it was done and what the next steps are going to be. I recognize that the many proclamations from state capitals and from Washington, the legislation, the Treasury regulations, and so forth, couched for the most part in banking and legal terms, ought to be explained for the benefit of the average citizen. I owe this in particular because of the fortitude and the good temper with which everybody has accepted the inconvenience and the hardships of the banking holiday. And I know that when you understand what we in Washington have been about, I shall continue to have your cooperation as fully as I have had your sympathy and your help during the past week. First of all, let me state the simple fact that when you deposit money in a bank, the bank does not put the money into a safe deposit vault. It invests your money in many different forms of credit, in bonds, in commercial paper, in mortgages, and in many other kinds of loans. In other words, the bank puts your money to work to keep the wheels of industry and of agriculture turning round. A comparatively small part of the money that you put into the bank is kept in currency, an amount which in normal times is wholly sufficient to cover the cash needs of the average citizen. In other words, the total amount of all the currency in the country is only a comparatively small proportion of the total deposits in all the banks of the country. What then happened during the last few days of February and the first few days of March? Because of undermined confidence on the part of the public, there was a general rush by a large portion of our population to turn bank deposits into currency or gold. A rush so great that the soundest banks couldn't get enough currency to meet the